Alright, friends, I just got done with my kitty sitting shift and I already had a plan on what I was going to do for today's video. I actually have off today and I'm going to be resting up for the PSO2 New Genesis beta tonight, but I thought this was going to be more relevant to what, the average person wants to see on here, Muso content. I've still got a little bit more to do with Muso May, but there's just been so many games coming out. I need to get the Basara Love in there at some point, but for now, we're going to look at this review that they did with Koinuma recently. So I'm just going to skim through this. They're talking about how the roster is smaller. Is it possible that the characters will return? They said that they don't have any plans currently. Uh, that probably means there's going to be a Samurai Warriors 5-2. Pretty much all but confirmed. As far as I know, they still can't do Extreme Legends because of the lawsuit, so I'm not sure what's going to happen there. I've heard conflicting reports on like what the season pass actually entails. From what I understand, it seems like it's actually going to have 15 weapons in it. I don't know if they're actually going to be skins or not. This is Koei Tecmo here. They generally have some really weird DLC, but I don't think they're going to charge for skins. I think that they're going to be unique weapons, but they haven't really talked about it yet. We might not know until release in about a month. There's going to be a lot of clones. There was a video earlier today from, I believe, Dengeki. It's either Dengeki or Famitsu. I don't remember which one, but they showed Nagamasa immediately after Mitsuhide, and it was pretty apparent that it seems like the characters that are cloned are only going to have like one or two moves. So without playing the game, without having a lot of footage to go off of, it seems like the clones are going to be like how they were in Dynasty Warriors 9. You had Guojia, he was a bow user, and everybody else who used the bow was way worse than him because he had the unique stun trigger, which lets you just do infinite juggles without a second thought. All the other people who used the bow staff, they were like nowhere near as good. That's probably how it's going to be here. Mitsuki and Yasuke share the martial arts moveset, so it's probably going to be one or the other is going to be good. Maybe Yasuke is going to be the busted one, and then Mitsuki is like not going to have that move, and she's going to be worse. It'll be interesting to see how it works, but the clones are about what I expected. Seems like they're going to be mostly similar. They're going to have a couple like minor advantages or differences. Okay, so they're talking about the aging. Only Mitsuhide and Nobunaga are going to age. We already knew that. No create an officer. I've never really cared for that feature much myself. I think in this game, it could have had some practical use. It was kind of fun to make them in 7 and 8 empires because you could have like these weird patchwork movesets where you have like 3 different movesets combined and stuff like that with between the Muso attacks and things. It would be interesting, but it seems like they're not going to do that. It seems like a very obvious thing to throw into the inevitable expansion. They're going to get a lot of people pissed off that you can't play as your favorite characters and all the clones and stuff. I imagine that's how they're going to go about things, but what might happen is they might do it similarly to how they did it with Dynasty Warriors 8, where 7 and 8 respectively, where they decloned some characters through DLC weapons and then they expanded upon those movesets in the next game. Okay, so you can switch weapons. Very similar to how it worked in 7 and 8, so if the character you like's got a crappy clone moveset, you've got some options there. Muso Frenzy attacks. So I wonder if hyper attacks will actually do any damage on officers. From what I've seen, it doesn't seem like they do, but I guess once you have them juggled, it seems like that you actually can use them on the officers, which I think is good. I always thought that the Godspeed attacks were like they were a band-aid on the issue that the combat was getting too slow. The movesets were too outdated for how many more officers there were on the screen compared to the PS2 games, or how many enemies there were on the screen. But you couldn't use them on officers, so it felt like the only new moves you had were basically useless. They're probably not going to do much damage, but it seems like they're going to have more practical use here. I've heard a lot of people say that archers are going to be really strong in this game, like Dynasty Warriors 3 status, so seems like they're really going to be promoting using all the mechanics at your disposal. Saying the story will have more content than Samurai Warriors 4. I'm not really sure what that means. That could mean a lot of things, but I feel like it may not actually be a good thing because they don't have a lot of characters. You don't want to be fighting generic officers the whole time. That was the problem with Dynasty Warrior 7. Like, they added the Jin Dynasty, but or the Jin faction, but they only had like 5 or 6 playable characters. So what they ended up doing was they increased the lifespan past the actual historical lifespan of some of the other officers from Shu and stuff, and you just fought them over and over and over again. I hope that the story does not overstay its welcome. I hope that they just ended at a good period and they can expand upon it whenever they make another game or an expansion or something. I remember the end of Dynasty Warrior 7 being a real drag because you just kept fighting the same 5 officers and they had like really stupid reasons to keep coming back. But the real reason from a game development standpoint was that they didn't have enough unique characters in the late era. With 8 and 9 respectively, that became less of an issue, but you can still see it there sometimes. Like Jiang Wei comes back like 30 times. We'll see how that works. Hopefully it doesn't overstay its welcome. Hopefully they have like a good endgame mode too. We haven't heard anything about that yet. I hope it's not going to be like the standard vanilla version of Musou games that get expansions where all you have to do is just the story mode over and over. Hopefully there'll be a little bit more to it than that. Local and online co-op supporting up to 2 players. You can unlock it by completing the opening of the game. Who knows if the netcode's going to be any good? We all know Koei Musou netcode is always like worse than like delay-based netcode in fighting games. Hopefully they've improved it, but I think the fact that they're still shackled to the old consoles, which is something that they mentioned lower down here, I think probably wouldn't expect too much from that. So for frame rate, this is actually pretty interesting stuff for people who follow me. The frame rate on the Switch is going to be 30 FPS, while other platforms will be a variable frame rate of 60 FPS. That means that it's going to be uncapped, but it will run at a max of 60 FPS. We are not implementing any specific improvements for next generation consoles. So what they're saying is, while we are not implementing any specific improvements when the game is played on next generation consoles, the stability of the frame rate, load times, the behavior of the game will be better on the latest hardware. That's kind of a half-truth. I know a lot of the... I don't have a PS5, obviously, but a lot of the backwards compatible games, meaning most of the PS4 library, they can't actually benefit from the SSD that's in there for the native PS5 games. They will load faster, but they won't load as fast as a native PS5 game. If you're going to be playing this on a Series X or a PS5, realistically, the best thing you could expect would be that the frame rate would be a locked 60 FPS. I've only got a box standard base PS4. I'm on the fence about whether I want to get this or not. It's going to be like almost 8,600 yen, which is going to cost me about $90. I know people are going to want the footage right away, but I'm kind of hoping that someone will put up footage of how it runs on a base PS4, and we'll go from there. But they're not going to be doing anything with it, which I find kind of odd. I think they could at least get rid of the load times, but load times in Musou games generally aren't that bad because ever since the PS2 era, they have always made it so that when you're on the preparation menu, it is actually streaming. It's actually loading while you're doing all that. So if you're doing a lot of stuff in the menus, generally load times are a non-issue, but it does feel a little bit odd how they're not even really going to be using the hardware much at all. The fact that it runs at an uncapped frame rate means that just by just the order of, or the logic of how you're using better hardware, it's going to be a locked 60 FPS, but it doesn't seem like you really will need it. Hopefully it at least runs well on the PS4 Pro. That's more accessible to a lot of people. And then finally, this one is pretty interesting too. Also, how are these new machines enable Koei Tecmo to improve upon the Musou genre in future games when legacy platforms will be removed? Can fans expect much better AI, for instance? The first thing that comes to mind would be increasing the number of characters and enemies that can be displayed on the screen at one time, which would allow for the total numbers of hits and attacks recorded to be in the tens of thousands. With such advances, the Warrior series concept of exhilarating 1 versus 1,000 action will probably become a thing of the past. I think the AI will also be greatly improved, as well as better graphics for the stages, along with several other additional points. Now, the interesting thing about this is, last gen, they really did not make that many exclusive Musou games. You had Dynasty Warriors 9, you had stuff like Arslan, and Warriors Orochi 4. They really didn't put out that many. For the most part, things were still cross-gen until I believe Spirit of Sanada. I think that was like the last PS3 game they put out. And that was only 5 years ago. So I think it's odd that they're saying this. I don't think that they're going to really can remove support for legacy platforms anytime soon. Generally, Koei Tecmo, they're very slow to adapt a new platform. You know, they were still putting out PS2 games up until like 2008 or 2009. By that point, the PS3 had been out for about 3 years, so the install base had grown, and people were expecting better things from Muso games. Obviously, Muso games are very CPU-heavy games, a lot heavier than a lot of other games. I know a lot of people complain that the graphics are not great, but they've always been very CPU-heavy games, which is why they run like crap on stuff like the PS4, because the PS4 does not have a good CPU. It's interesting to see like them actually talking about abandoning platforms, but I don't really think they're going to be able to do that. We all know how much of a nightmare it is to get a new console right now. An Xbox Series X, less so. It's a lot easier to get one of those than a PS5, but they've got such a pitifully small install base, and a lot of them are being bought by scalpers and stuff. So I don't really think they're going to abandon it anytime soon. I think the best we can hope for is that maybe whatever comes after Samurai Warriors 5, meaning Dynasty Warriors 9 Empires, and whatever franchise Muso they're inevitably working on that's going to make more money and be a better game than their mainline stuff. Maybe they'll start doing next-gen patches where they'll have like more enemies on screen and a better frame rate. Maybe they'll try to get above 60 FPS for the first time. Most Koei Tecmo Muso games are actually locked at 60 FPS, even if you're on PC. I think the only one that isn't is Dynasty Warriors 9. So we'll see what happens there. I feel like this is kind of like it's giving people unrealistic expectations. I mean, from a business standpoint, nobody can really abandon the old platforms right now. As much as they want to, I'm sure they're tired of working with that crappy hardware. But from a business standpoint, there's like several orders of magnitude more people with last-gen platforms than current-gen ones. Even people who have the money cannot get one right now. I think it's going to be a couple years, but at the same time, if they can like produce like a Dynasty Warriors 10 and have it exclusive, I think it actually could be pretty good for their company, because right now there's not really a whole lot to really own a PS5 for at the moment. There are a lot of the first-party games have gotten patches for 60 FPS. There's Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, which from what I saw of that game, watching streams and stuff, it definitely felt like the kind of game that should have never been on last-gen platforms. It has like a metric ass ton of loading, and there's like a lot of forced walking sections and stuff to load the assets in. It'll be interesting to see like what happens with the next generation of consoles in general, because you know, forced walking sections and running slow and stuff, those have all been side effects of, or byproducts of, just the consoles not being able to stream assets off the disk or the hard drive fast enough. Now that that's not an issue, it's going to be interesting to see what it means for other games. I think with Muso games, the best thing you can expect is pretty much what he said here. More enemies on screen, better graphics, and then a more stable, consistent frame rate. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but I don't really think we should expect exclusive Muso games for a while. I think it would be in their best benefit to move on, because the last-gen hardware really can't handle these games, and they have such terrible optimization in the first place. But I think they should strike while the iron's hot. Try to get out an exclusive game. They're going to have a lot more eyes on them just because there's not that many games to play on it right now. There's Ratchet and Clank coming soon. There's the Final Fantasy VII Remake Remaster. There's Returnal. And that's basically it in terms of like what has a concrete release date. We'll see what happens. In terms of my plans, next month is going to be a pretty big nightmare for me. There's Scarlet Nexus coming out. There's Samurai Warriors 5. I think there's going to be some DLC for some other games I'm playing. My wallet's going to be strapped pretty thin. If people really want to see Samurai Warriors 5 before I apply for the key and most likely get one, because I am a Koei Tecmo America partner, go ahead and let me know in the comments. That will influence my decision. I'll put up with a crap frame rate to get the lowdown on the mechanics faster. I do have a phone with Google Translate. I have Black Kite. I'm sure it'll help me out too. I'm aiming to do it, but it's going to be pretty expensive. It's going to be like $90 to do it. So I'm going to have to gauge how much it's worth doing. I'll have to see if they put out a content creator inquiry form for Samurai Warriors 5 before release. It's not coming out for about another month and a week. Actually, about a month and 2 weeks, roughly, a little less than 2 weeks after a month. So we'll see what happens there. Overall, this is some pretty decent stuff, but the clones definitely seem like they have barely anything different about them. If you're expecting them to be more like some other games that have cloned characters, but they have like a little bit more going for them, I think you're going to be disappointed. But it seems like the game is pretty fluid. It does look pretty nice. I like the new art style. The new mechanics look pretty decent too. We haven't really seen anybody good use them yet, but I think this game has potential. I'm cautiously optimistic, but at the same time, the fact that they have 27 characters and like almost half of them are clones is a really bad look. I hope that the season pass, as much as I wish that they would just declone everybody in the base game and have that be it. That's not how games really work anymore, unfortunately. So, hopefully the season pass will have weapons like that they supposedly do, and then we'll have a full cast. Thanks for watching.